I've recently placed a few orders at Fanatic and I've got some cool parts coming. Today we are installing some new carbon bars on the middle child. So I'm heading to Moab in 50 minutes. This is kind of the story of every modification I do on my bike. I've always do it right before a really big trip. I don't want to be late, but I don't want to rush this either. So I've got these carbon bars. I've got some other great parts coming, including a new fork. I'm going to be trying a new fork on the middle child, a 29er fork, so I can run 29er wheels and play around and experiment with that. If I change my bars and the fork at the same time, I'm not going to be able to tell what the bars actually feel like because I won't know what's the bars and what's the fork. So I'm going to try to change one component at a time. These are OneUp's brand new bars. I got these from Fanatic, like I said. These are super inexpensive for some carbon bars, and they have flex engineered into them. So as you know, not all carbon is created equal. And if you don't know that, hopefully you do now, because the way they lay the fibers and the way they can engineer flex into it some directions and no flex the other directions means not all carbon bars, wheels, or frames feel the same. These bars are engineered to be stiff forward and back, but flex up and down. That will give a more comfortable ride. And on a hardtail where not everything's comfortable, I think that's going to be a welcome addition. I'm not affiliated with OneUp. I paid good money for these, but here's some of the features. You'll notice they taper it down really quick, but it's interesting. It stays really wide right there. So it's wide from the top, thin from the bottom, and then you've got the grip diameter, a very long part of the bars that way. These have a 35mm clamp, which is a newish standard. Not all bikes are going to have stems that fit these. They are 800mm wide, 20mm upsweep, 8 degrees back and 5 degrees up. That's pretty standard. And like a lot of good components, they've got markings on them for where to cut them. I don't run 800 bars. I'm not super tall. I run 760 bars, so I'm going to cut these down first before I install them. As always, this is a how-I, not a how-to. First, we're going to tape it off right at the 760 mark. This gives me a visual indicator, and it also helps reduce splintering and chipping. Now, I've cut several bars before, carbon bars, and I do have the specific carbon blade for a hacksaw, but I'm not going to use that today. Today I'm going to be using my angle grinder. I think it makes a cleaner cut and it's quicker, but it adds to the dust in the air, which is dangerous. We don't know how dangerous carbon is. The studies are still out. It could be worse than asbestos. So it's best to use eye protection and respiratory protection. Here we go. That's a simple metal cut-off blade, and now I'm going to hit it with the sanding blade. All right, now I'm just going to take a little bit of fine sandpaper. What grit is this? This is 220. Just round out the corner so it doesn't splinter off. Even though I don't have the power tools, I still shouldn't breathe this. Even with the hacksaw, be really careful around carbon. Who knows? Maybe it's as safe as inhaling a leaf. I highly doubt it, though. Okay. All right, we don't have any splinters or frays. 760, ready to go on the bike. Let's go get the bike. I'm in my 30s and wheelies are still fun. Awesome. Love mountain biking. These grips are going to be the hardest part. I'd like to reuse these because they're pretty new. I don't know if that's an option. Oh good, they're the same length. That's always good. For this step, we're gonna use my favorite tool, the Toe Peak Ratchet Rocket. I'll put a link to that in the description. Love this thing. This bike has the parts from my old Santa Cruz Chameleon, which were really low-end parts. So this bike's pretty heavy. So when I replace a part, I want to replace it with a good part that's strong, but if I can lighten it up a little, that's great. And one of the biggest surprises is where that weight is carried. It's in cheap stems, cheap cranks, cheap cassettes, cheap bars, cheap seat posts. So while I'm mainly replacing this bar for feel purposes, I will also lose some weight on it, which is never a bad thing. Remember, these bars only fit on a 35mm stem. So since they're carbon bars, I'm going to use carbon paste. This is called Fiber Grip from Finish Line. It's different than grease. It has little glass balls inside of it. It's almost like sandy grease or sandy adhesive. I don't want to call it adhesive, but it's got these little balls in it that crush and grip and prevent the carbon from twisting in here. Carbon can be very slippery, so it's recommended to use carbon paste whenever you're mounting something to something carbon. I'm an educator in real life, and I always try to teach something new in each of my videos. If you learned something new from this video, please let me know. And consider supporting me by either using some of the discount codes from the companies that I work with, or become a patron. I have a Patreon. I don't offer anything special on there because I haven't figured out what extra benefit to add patrons yet, but if you want to support financially, that's one way to do it. Or get a Hardtail Party shirt, or tell your buddies about Hardtail Party. That's the best thing you can do, is spread the word. I'd love to grow this channel. The more I grow it, the more products I can get from companies to review and so forth. All right, I'm looking for the middle line on this. I'm gonna show you, this looks nice. I love the carbon, how you can see the carbon in it. All right, we've got some really nice markings on it. I do wish that's not a vertical marker. It looks like it. That is the vertical marker, that guy right there that you want to center. So that's kind of deceiving. I don't know what that scratch is from, but we can decide on how much it's rolled back with these increments here. We can center it left and right. You can also go top to bottom and center it that way. I believe the sweep and feel is almost identical to my last one, but with any new component, when you get on the trail, you're always tweaking it the first 10 minutes. So I'll get it close and then go from there. I love watching the World Cup track walks and behind the scenes, how they like have notebooks on how many millimeters to move each one and all of that. I totally geek out on that stuff. I actually like back sweep and up sweep, and one day I may experiment with more ergonomic bars that have even more back sweep, but I'm afraid it'll hurt my reach. Yeah, that feels pretty good. We'll start with that. Here's another amazing tool that I love. This is the Toe Peak Nano Torque Bar, and the way it works is these keys are all set to preset torque specs: 4 Newton meters, 5 Newton meters, 6 Newton meters. You put your bit in and you tighten it. And we want to tighten these evenly. This is one of those old school stems. Some stems you're actually supposed to completely tighten the top first and then tighten the rest. But not this one, so I'm going to make sure we're even in the gap all the way around. So that gap is the same as that gap, which is the same as that gap and that gap. And now we're going to torque it and watch what happens. It prevents this from turning once it reaches torque. So watch. It's turning, turning, slipping. And that way it prevents you from over torquing. That prevents you from crushing your carbon bars, prevents you from weakening them, It prevents you from over tightening them or under tightening them, and you know you got the correct torque spec. Super cool tool. I'll put a link to that as well in the description below. I really like it when they put torque specs right there, 7.5 Newton meters on this. I don't know what the torque specs on the bar clamp are. It doesn't say. Shame on Raceface, this is awful. I'm looking up torque specs and they've got a cool visual diagram of what to do. It tells you all of this and then it says torque to stem specifications. Well, I came here for the stem specifications. I don't understand it. Now I have to go somewhere else to go find the torque specs. Same thing with their handlebar install. Torque to stem specifications. GoPro, stop recording. I'm gonna go with 4 for now. Do a little more research before I ride this, make sure 4 is correct. But this is a super cool tool to make sure you got the right torque. You don't have to adjust it, you don't have to click it around like a normal torque wrench. It's a little bit spendy like all torque wrenches in the world, but man, it's sure worth it to not break anything and have the right torque specs. If you're a new mechanic and you don't know how tight to do things, definitely get a torque wrench. All right, now we just swap the cockpit over. I got 15 minutes till I need to leave. I think I can do everything but the grips in that amount of time. Now, I like SRAM and Shimano, both shifters and brakes. I like them all just fine. I usually run SRAM stuff, but I really like SRAM's Matchmaker, how easy it is for everything to bolt on together. How I don't have to slide anything over the end. Love that. This goes on here, and that goes in there. Boom. I always like to keep my levers a little bit loose too, so that in the event of a crash, they slide. Rotate a little bit. I mean, that does gouge up your carbon a little bit, but it's better than over clamping and creating a crease or a weak spot in your carbon. Another cool feature, this has these grids on here so you can actually measure that your brakes are equal on both sides. If you're OCD, which a lot of us are. And if you're not OCD, maybe it's time to start becoming OCD about your bike. It's good to pay attention to it, know where everything is. Yeah, I think I want that there. Thank you for this Matchmaker SRAM, that is awesome. Now we're going to do my Barfly computer mount. Oh, this is one of those weird 2.5 mils, dang it. The one bummer of the Toe Peak Ratchet Rocket, it doesn't have a 2.5 mil. It kind of has one on the chain breaker, but it's not very good. I've had carbon bars on my other bikes for a while, and I really like the feel of good carbon bars. They're less fatiguing than aluminum sometimes. I really want to get one of those K-Edge top cap mounts. This Barfly one's okay, but kind of weird. All right, all that's left are grips. Now, I love the convenience of lock-on grips, but I love the feel of ESI grips even more. There's a couple tricks to installing these. The first is to get a really good bar end plug. The plugs that come with these are awful and break within 2 rides, and then these start deteriorating from the outside in. These are Colt BMX bar end plugs, and they cover the whole amount of the outside, so I can get 8 or 9 months out of these of riding very frequently. Another tip is there's a flat spot on these grips. You don't notice that your first time installing them, but you notice it once they're installed and you go to ride. If the flat spot's in different spots on each grip, it's super annoying. It doesn't go away. I like my flat spot to be right at the tips of my fingers, so it's almost, my flat spot's pointing down. It kind of creates a ridge if you do it wrong, and I don't want the ridge in my palms, so it's all personal preference, but let's see how we do. So here's the quick and easy way to install these. Take some rubbing alcohol, pour a little bit in there, Swish it around. Pour the rest on your carbon bars. Put your fingers on the flat spot and go to town. It's a warm day, so they're drying fast. Almost there. It's not normally this hard. Must just be a warm day. Boy, I'm not selling the ease of installing these, am I? Now I'm gonna check for my flat spot and see where it is. All right. I love these grips, they're so comfortable. Now I put my plug from my Colt BMX grips. They're just slightly smaller. This one's worn out, I need a new one. But they're gonna protect that end a lot better than the stock ones. This is harder than a Cushcore install right now. Come on, what's the deal? Almost there. Now I'm too tired to ride anyway. I'm gonna go double check that the flat spots are where they need to be by riding it around a little. Lever angle is total personal preference. Guys that are pointed downhill, a lot of the time, lift them up. I ride up and downhill, so I like them kind of everywhere. That feels pretty good. Oh yeah, I can feel a difference on these bars immediately. Just kidding, I can't. There's subtle differences. When all these companies market them as 5% stiffer and 10% lighter, you're not gonna feel it right away. You may not even feel it ever. And if you do feel it, it's usually a sum of a whole bunch of little things you're feeling. Anyway, time to go take this to Moab and give these bars a proper testing. And I like that, just changing one component at a time so I can pinpoint exactly what it is that I'm feeling. Thanks for watching, hope you learned something. There's a party in the mountains and you're always invited.